Actually, following up on this question, Guruji, I think it would be very pertinent for you to explain, especially to us Westerners, why Amanaska Yoga? We are used to hear, when we hear yoga in the West, we always think of asanas. And I remember when you went to Mexico City and we were talking about Amanaska Yoga and that you were going to be teaching a course. Everybody was like, "Oh, what type of yoga is that? Is that with the one where you sweat or the high temperature or where they yell at you, or is it the hatha or what kind of yoga is that?" Can you please explain what does yoga mean? The more ample meaning of yoga, and why Amanaska Yoga, please.
All right. Okay. You've asked two excellent questions, very pertinent for us. And so let's start with yoga. And yoga is a generic term and going to the spiritual traditions of India and found in the Bhagavad Gita, very well enunciated and formulated, and very well enunciated and developed in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, for example. So there are so many texts in yoga available even today, Geranda Samhita and Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and all classical texts, the Yoga Taravali, so many of them. And so the basic idea is that there is a human consciousness in which there is a certain egoity, human consciousness, a moving energy, moving and darting energy in consciousness, and which is inseparable from the sense of self. So you say, I went there, I ate an ice cream, it was so lovely. I went to Mexico, I climbed on the pyramids. My God, what an awesome experience. So that sense of self enters there, and that sense of self is constantly there as you move through every little thing in life, pleasurable, painful, everything. So that is the human being. His consciousness is moving, he's changing in time and so on. Then there is supposed to be the oversoul or the Paramatma. Parama means supreme, and Atma is the soul, is the primordial awareness. And you are supposed to have a connecting place with that supreme soul, which you may define to be either God or Godhead, depending on the way you want to look at it. And when you are extremely silent in meditation, where all mental activity has totally ceased, then that is the point where you meet with the oversoul or with the total cosmic consciousness or with Godhead. And that junction where you meet, where the separated individual soul or the individual consciousness with a sense of self, which is called Jivatma, and the Jivatma goes back and goes back to the junction, and it becomes one with the Paramatma. And at that junction or at that meeting point, the dividing line between the two is erased. It's non-existent. And you describe that in Sanskrit terms, Tattvamasi, meaning Tat, that thou art. That is, thou means the human being, and Tat, that means that, Godhead, the Supreme. And at the junction, you become that. But when you move away from the junction, you will again function like a human being with a sense of self. But you know that the sense of self is a chip of the old block. You now know that because you actually discovered it. And therefore, there will be a complete change in outlook on life, that whatever is happening here is just a part of that glorious thing which is beginningless, endless. So yoga means the yoking, the joining, and the bringing together of a fragment with the whole. The fragment is called Jivatma, the whole is the Paramatma. That is yoga, generic term. Now, the whole culture of bodily postures and mudras and asanas, bodily postures, and breathing, regulated breathing, pranayama, it belongs to a separate culture that's called Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga, that etymology goes back to Ida and Pingala Nadis, the right nostril, the left nostril. that's a different thing. That's not the whole of yoga. The whole of yoga is vast. It's the spiritual tradition of India. And this Hatha Yoga is a certain practice of bodily postures and regulation of breathing. That is Hatha Yoga. And Amanaska Yoga, when you come to Amanaska Yoga, in the traditional spiritual literature of India, you meet with the term Amanaska Yoga. And what it means is, so yoga we have explained what it means, and manas is used both for the mind, meaning the whole arena of consciousness, which is feelings, intellect, memory, and thought, and everything. The whole of that is called manas. And sometimes it is applied specifically to the feeling nature, manas. Now, Amanaska Yoga, the prefix the particle, it is a particle of negation. So when you say Amanaska, it means for the negation of the mind. In other words, for the stopping of the mind, for the termination of the mind, for the ending of the mind. So Amanaska Yoga is that yoga whose aim is to shut down the functioning of the mind, meaning, but in sleep you can say that the mind is shut down. You can say that. So it's not that kind of shutting down. It is the shutting down of the activities of the mind which are wasteful, which are futile, which are in the nature of disorder, and which are in the nature of a dissipation of energy. So the shutting down of whole of that is Amanaska Yoga. And in the tradition there is a sacred book, Amanaska Yoga, which is a conversation between Shiva Mahadeva, the supreme Godhead, and Rishi Vamadeva, one of the sages. There's a conversation happening. That the book is also called Amanaska Yoga. But my thing, I have used that word, I've taken the traditional word and I've used it in a completely new way. What is that new way? Amanaska Yoga is the name of my commentary on the world teacher's lifetime work.
Sri Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti's lifetime work. So that is, I called it Amanaska Yoga, and I put it in the form of a structured 120 lessons where you undergo inward flowering through self-knowing by awakening to sorrow, then understanding sorrow, and ending of sorrow. The whole process. Systematic development.
That was a great explanation, Guruji. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for asking the question.